We begin with a speech that never should have been delivered, a speech that President Obama may well regret, a confusing and at times incoherent effort to explain to the American people his ever-changing stance on attacks against Syria. Listen to this.
I have resisted calls for military action because we cannot resolve someone else's civil war through force. The situation profoundly changed, though, on August 21st, when Assad's government gassed to death over 1,000 people. If we fail to act, the Assad regime will see no reason to stop using chemical weapons. I believed it was right, in the absence of a direct or imminent threat to our security, to take this debate to Congress. I have therefore asked the leaders of Congress to postpone a vote to authorize the use of force.
Well, minutes upon minutes of the president speaking directly to the American public. It was a speech that ultimately raised more questions than it answered. We'll lay it all out in the Chalk Talk in moments, and we'll be talking with some of the leading political minds in the country about what the president accomplished and perhaps what he lost. The president's speech, an example of the Obama administration's poor management and mixed messages on the issue of Syria. Communication between the White House and the State Department clearly contributed to the confusion as President Obama and his Secretary of State found themselves out of sync and out of touch over recent days. Fox News chief political correspondent Carl Cameron has our report.
When Secretary of State John Kerry mentioned that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad could avert a U.S. attack by relinquishing all chemical weapons, Kerry was utterly dismissive.
But he isn't about to do it, and it can't be done, obviously.
But President Obama embraced the idea in a Monday media blitz, saying he had discussed it months earlier with Russian President Vladimir Putin, raising questions about whether the U.S. Secretary of State knew about it or was out of the loop.
He seems to be constantly caught by surprise, and he doesn't seem to be the one who's the go-to guy when there's a tough decision that needs to be made.
There was a disconnect on the size of the potential attack. Kerry first indicated it would be swift and decisive, but when support in Congress failed to emerge, the administration started downplaying the scope, and Kerry got in line.
That is exactly what we're talking about doing. Unbelievably small, limited kind of effort.
But that backfired, undermining the threat of a strike in the first place, and congressional support for military action eroded further. What critics say has been a zigzagging presidential policy towards Syria has raised concerns in Washington and capitals around the world about both the U.S. message and mission.
When the Secretary talks about an attack that is unbelievably small, on the same day when the President says the U.S. military doesn't do pinpricks, you wonder exactly whether or not the messaging is correct. Barack Obama is the most controlling foreign policy president since Richard Nixon. He doesn't delegate, he dominates.
This diminishes in some ways Secretary of State John Kerry's stature because he knows a lot more about foreign policy than Barack Obama does, but that's the way the president has set it up. And unfortunately, that's probably one of the reasons why he makes so many mistakes.
Kerry's gotten ahead of the president more than once in his 9 months as the nation's top diplomat. After Mr. Obama noted that drone strikes have been reduced in Pakistan, his Secretary of State appeared to up the ante.
I think the program will end, and I think the president has a very real timeline, and we hope it's going to be very, very soon.
Kerry's had to acknowledge that on-the-job training within the Obama administration has sometimes been a school of hard knocks.
I've certainly learned as a new member of a cabinet, no decision is made until the President of the United States makes the decision.
Kerry's been loyal promoting the president's evolving policies so far, and now he's off for a meeting with his Russian counterpart tomorrow in Geneva on how Syria says it will give up its chemical weapons, even though Kerry rejected that notion only days ago. Lou?
Carl, thank you very much. Carl Cameron. Today is also, of course, the first anniversary of the Benghazi attacks. The Obama administration has yet to bring to justice those responsible for the deaths of 4 Americans who were killed in Libya, nor has it taken steps to punish those in our own government that left the U.S. consulate so vulnerable in such an obvious and significant date. Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge with our report.
As the nation marked the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil, Attorney General Eric Holder publicly honored the heroism of 4 Americans murdered in Benghazi.
Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, Sean Smith, and Ambassador Chris Stevens.
In this letter, the CIA pledged to make the Benghazi survivors available to congressional investigators.
They acted with great bravery and patriotism.
And with these new images of the horror, the relatives voice frustration.
I will not give up. That was my only child. Oh, I want answers.
A review of internal memos and congressional testimony shows the policy decision to maintain the consulate with substandard security was made at the highest levels of the State Department by officials who have so far escaped blame. This action memo, signed by Undersecretary for Management Patrick Kennedy 9 months before the assault, okayed the operation with the promise of better security that was never fulfilled. A seasoned diplomat says Kennedy would not have acted in isolation. He needed cover from executives on the department's 7th floor.
I feel for a place as sensitive as Libya with Secretary Clinton directly. I don't think he would have made what is a really fundamentally political decision purely on management grounds.
The decision to keep the Benghazi post open as security unraveled was laid bare in congressional testimony. But the significance of a conversation between Ambassador Stevens and Clinton was largely overlooked.
According to Chris, Secretary Clinton wanted Benghazi converted into a permanent constituent post.
That September, Hicks testified Stevens was under pressure to pull together a list of upgrades to make Clinton's goal possible.
Chris needed to report before September 30th, the end of the fiscal year.
Mrs. Clinton's policy goal to make Benghazi permanent was a surprise to Ambassador Pickering, who co-chaired the State Department investigation. Mrs. Clinton was never interviewed.
Part of its investigation in June, Fox News asked the State Department media office whether Mrs. Clinton set the policy for Benghazi as the evidence suggests, and whether Undersecretary Kennedy consulted her. After initially downplaying the significance of the memo and testimony, today a spokeswoman says she would look into it. It's worth noting that neither Secretary Clinton nor the Undersecretary Kennedy nor any of the senior executives at the State Department were held responsible for creating what one of the family members described to Fox News as a death trap in Benghazi, Lou.
Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Joining us now, former Deputy Assistant to President George Bush, Brad Blakeman, former Congressman, Fox News contributor Alan West. Thank you both for being here. Brad, let me begin with you. Your reaction to that speech.
It's a speech that should have never been given by the president in prime time. The president had nothing to say to the American people that was the import to go around the world and give a message that basically says we're standing down. We're not asking the Congress to act.
But you're a Republican. You surely are cheering the fact that he made that speech.
No, I don't cheer the fact that our president made it a total embarrassment of the office of the presidency in the United States. This is a speech that went around the world. Billions of people watched this speech. They saw our president embarrass himself and our country. We are not going to war. The president asked us to stand down for the time being, waiting to see whether this Putin idea is going to be even relevant.
Well, Alan, can I get just from you at least crocodile tears about all of this? Any hope that the Republicans are going to seize upon this performance and say, "See, we told you so"?
Well, I don't think you need to take that type of immature reaction and say, we told you so. I believe that the president is doing a very good job walking into a U-shaped ambush and destroying himself. But the most important thing is
there you go. That's what I was waiting for, Alan.
Well, the most important thing, Lou, is when you look at the speech that the president gave last night, talking about this indignation and this moral obligation, I would have told him, do not give a speech like this when less than 24 hours later is the first anniversary of the loss of 4 Americans in Benghazi, where you said it was a phony scandal. And furthermore, you pretty much so abandoned 4 Americans in a combat zone when they were under attack. You know, the optics of this was absolutely horrible. You want to talk about a national security interest? Sovereign American territory was attacked in Benghazi. You want to talk about taking military action? We have not done anything to go after the people, and we know that it was Ansar al-Sharia, aligned to al-Qaeda, that conducted this operation. And now, today in the Washington Post, it was said that this was a well-planned operation and long before this quote-unquote video. So we had a president that deceived the American people, and he has not done anything in Benghazi, Libya, but destabilized that country.
You know, as Alan alludes to, and I tweeted last night, this president is not talking about the anniversary of Benghazi, the anniversary of September 11th. An incredible oversight, a failure of grace, And to me, duty as president, you know, you're talking about this is an embarrassing performance across the world. Embarrassing beyond belief because it's so contradictory, and I don't understand the hesitation to say that is the worst warped speech by a president I have ever witnessed.
Absolutely. Not only that, but it was intentional. That's the real disgrace, that the president left this Benghazi out specifically because he couldn't go there, because he knows that the American people know that they've been misled. Now, let me also say this. The president was on the verge of taking us to war. Lou, we don't even have a Homeland Security secretary even nominated for that post. There are at least 20 positions in Homeland Security at a senior level where there are no nominees. How is that possible? How do you blame the sequester or the Republicans on his failure to nominate a Secretary of Homeland Security at this critical time?
Alan, you get the last word.
Well, once again, I think that we have a very confusing foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East. If anything, he is destabilizing more countries. He said he was going to pivot away. And when you do that, you embolden our enemies and you really do abandon our allies. Look at what has happened in Libya. He went in there without congressional approval. So to say that he needs congressional approval, that's not the case. Look at what's happened in Egypt when he embraced the Muslim Brotherhood. He made a campaign promise decision to not leave residual forces in Iraq. Iran has filled that vacuum. And now he's going off on a venture into Syria, which is really ill-advised.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it is an adventure that is, well, not going to occur. And the pivot, as you point out, Alan, the pivot seems to be that he has turned squarely to Vladimir Putin as his
humanitarian,
as his resource of last resort. Thank you both.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Brad
much.
Blakeman, Alan West.